News first. Hotel has collapsed in southeastern Chinese city of Quanzhou, and they buried dozens of people under the rubble. Now, the building was reportedly being used as the quarantine site for the so-called deadly COVID-19 coronavirus, which has suddenly been renamed into SARS-CoV-2. I wonder how many noticed it. Perhaps it's Zionist in origin. They like to change the names. And footage from the scene showed the building reduced to rubble and emergency service were searching through the debris. Now, when this came out, there was 38 people had been rescued. I presume more followed. And it just crumpled. Like buildings just automatically crumple. Well, it's another distraction highlight piece, but who did it remains a mystery. And 70 people were trapped under the hotel remains, and no information on potential casualties or the cause of the collapse. This is a country that listeners should take note of, because there's a lot going on there that does fit the narrative, but there's a lot that doesn't. But take note of Saudi Arabia. Now, the Crown Prince has had all of his or some of his relatives arrested for allegedly plotting a coup against him and King Salman with the help of, quote, foreign powers, including the Americans, unquote. Now, the RT News, who covered this story, asked a Middle East analyst to weigh in, and he said 3 senior members of the Saudi royal family were arrested on Friday, and it was also reported by several Western media outlets. And the list of detainees includes Prince Ahmed bin Abdul Aziz, who is the younger brother of King Salman, Mohammed bin Nayef, the king's nephew, and the former crown prince Nawaf bin Nayef, who's the younger half-brother of Prince Nayef. All very Egyptian, isn't it? And the Saudi crown prince Mohammed bin Salman has allegedly accused them of treason, namely conducting contacts with foreign powers, including the Americans and others, to carry out a coup d'etat against King Salman and his son. And there were further reports of high-profile arrests that have yet to be confirmed by Saudi Arabia, but they wouldn't be unprecedented. There's another story today which kind of ties in. Saudi Arabia is Bush cartel, and linked with Israel. They fund them as they're part of the same group. And Israel is making its mark on Turkey. I did warn many shows back, it might have even been in Cosmic Voice, when I said 2 of the key countries would be Turkey and Japan. Well, there was a Twitter handle of the Israeli Defense Minister, Mr. Bennett, who alleged to have said it had been breached. I guess their servers are not as secure anymore, shall we say. And he sent out a highly off-message post urging the liberation of Palestine, followed by the lyrics of Turkey's anthem in English. Now, the post appeared briefly on Bennett's Twitter page on Saturday morning, whilst there is yet no confirmation of the intrusion from the minister or his office. The tweet was archived and captured in a number of screenshots before it was deleted. Now, of course, Mr. Netanyahu today is supporting Turkey's alleged attacking of Russia, of going to war with Russia. Someone needs to tell him it's not 1919 anymore. You'll get crushed, both of you. 2 more suspects have been caught after the deadly Pulwama terrorist attack, which killed 40 Indian troops and spiked hostilities between India and Pakistan, including a 19-year-old bomb maker who got chemicals from Amazon. Oh dear. This is another war that is playing out that has hidden doors, shall we say. And the 2 men, Waiz ul Islam and Mohed Abbas Rather, were arrested by India's counter-terrorism force on Friday, alleging Islam procured bomb ingredients such as ammonium nitrate from the online retail giant Amazon. Nice place. And the teen, whose father is a government employee, is also accused of personally bringing items to the terrorist cell that carried out the attack. And Jaish-e Mohammed, for his part, is said to have harboured the militants in his home that led up to the attack, including IED builder Mohammed Umar and the suicide bomber himself, Abdul Ahmed Dar. There's a lot going on between those 2 countries that has gone on for many hundreds, if not thousands of years, because of a certain base there, which is not as well occupied as it was in the past. Now, the one thing that's kind of pleasing with the distraction of the coronavirus, we haven't heard from Greta Thunberg for a while. And someone in, I think it's Sweden, I may be wrong, have invented the anti-Greta label to portray her as an evil right antichrist. But it only attracted more people to her ideas. Naomi Seibert, who says the human effect on climate change is vastly exaggerated. Now, this girl, who's a young girl, I think she's only about 15 or 16, 17 maybe, has been going around counteracting Greta Thunberg's rubbish. And she calls herself a climate realist and bluntly rejects the term climate change denier, which is another label used to describe her and her supporters by the opposing side. And it implies that we are just selfish and ignorant, she said, but it's not the case. We're about being scientific skeptics and looking into more sensible ways to improve the environment, to be more in line with our values when it comes to interacting with nature. And it looks a much less radical stance than the media darling Greta Thunberg, who insists that mankind must urgently cut emissions to zero to avoid catastrophic breakdown of the climate on Earth. But Naomi countered by saying she is basically just spewing panic and telling people to change their lives entirely, and has got nothing to do with science and skepticism anymore. And that's what's awful about it. Exactly. Well said. Israel. I wonder whether the cure will come from there. Take note. Announced this week that everyone arriving in Israel will be required to self-quarantine for 14 days to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Benjamin Nutty Asshole says all those coming to Israel from abroad will be placed in isolation. In a video address this week, and the Israeli Interior Minister, Mr. Derry, said the measure would be effective immediately for all Israelis returning to the country, and it will apply to foreign citizens from this Thursday. And the move means that foreign arrivals will have to prove that they have adequate accommodation to be quarantined during their stay. That should prevent a load of AIPAC-led senators going there for free. I wonder, will they get quarantined? Maybe not. Rules for one and rules for another. You know, we have all this panic this week in Europe and America, which has taken over where it originated from, and people tend to forget these things. But in the past week, we've heard of all kinds of drama in Italy and France, the UK, and yet the American government, I'm not so sure it was Trump, sent 30,000 American soldiers into Europe with no masks. Perhaps that's telling. Denmark, not often we cover them, but unfortunately they're not acting in the right way either. And their parliament on Thursday unanimously passed an emergency coronavirus law which gives health authorities power to force testing, treatment and quarantine with the backing of the police. See Kyle. Now, the far-reaching new law will remain in force until March 2021. Not March this year, next year, when it will expire under what is known as a sunset clause. Now, what was indicative and should be taken note here is that 179 politicians in Denmark's parliament, and yet only 97 turned up to vote on it. All very Patriot Act, that to me. And it's time for the people of Denmark to remind their government who is really in charge. The California governor, Gavin Newsom, has turned over 286 state-owned buildings and properties at no cost in order to house citizens who are sleeping on the streets. Nice move. And the properties include state-owned underdeveloped lots, fairgrounds, armories and other government buildings. And the move comes in the wake of other housing initiatives launched since Newsom took office in January last year, including deploying emergency shelters in the form of mobile homes for the homeless. And he said, let's call it what it is, a disgrace that the richest state in the richest nation is failing to properly house, heal and humanely treat so many of its own people. Now, there's a fairly rampant homelessness problem in California and is normally attributed to a lack of low-income housing options. Well, I'm not surprised, because they deliberately pushed all the rent up, deliberately pushed all the house prices up, so only certain people with lots of money could live there. It's ethnic cleansing. I warned of it about California 6 years ago. And it's all happened. San Francisco's another one, Chicago another one, New York, it's happening there as well. You watch, like Facebook, they push all these people out, and then the Order Borders program kicks in and they realise they've chewed too much of the tail and there's nothing left, and they'll be screaming for them all to come back. You watch. Anyway, Newsom has proposed $750 million for the purpose of getting this kind of housing built and getting people in as fast as possible. And this is on top of the $1.6 billion that had already been allocated for homeless services and other projects. And the state said they would offer the properties to local governments for $1 leases, and said it had earmarked $650 million in state emergency homeless aid to build out sites. But the local governments are charged with reviewing the sites and making final decisions about housing people there. Now, the homeless rate in California is around 151,000 individuals currently, with 41,000 of those being chronically homeless over a long term. Maybe this is something that the THI California group can get involved in. Why not? Instead of it going to all their people, perhaps you can claim grants on behalf of the People's Club, and we can get started on helping the homeless in California. So that was a nice story. It is another one that kind of ends the news, but we've got other pieces that I need to cover to do with THI. The word caremongering, which did not exist too much until Friday, March the 13th, last week, and yet in just 3 days later, what started out as a way to help vulnerable people in Toronto has turned into a movement spreading fast across Canada. And more than 35 Facebook groups have been set up in 72 hours to serve communities in places that include Ottawa, Halifax and Annapolis County, which is in Nova Scotia, with more than 30,000 members between them. And people are joining the groups to offer help to others within their communities, particularly those who are at more risk of health complications that are related to the coronavirus. And the pandemic has led to acts of kindness around the world, from delivering soup to the elderly in the UK to an exercise class held for quarantined residents on the balconies in Spain. But in Canada, a country whose inhabitants are stereotyped in the media as kind to a fault, helping others has become an organised movement called caremongering. Well, I'm pleased with that. And it's all been driven by the social media. Not many people like it, or less people like it, but it can be used for the right things. And the altruism is arranged online, and the hashtags provide a permanent record of all the good happening in different communities across Canada. And I thought it was a fairly uplifting read in what is anxious times for many.